This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. I hung myself on a secretive forum, hoping to fetch a good price. I took a photo of myself kneeling, holding my ID card, unabashedly revealing my face. What greeted me was unbridled ridicule. You must be crazy for money. You look like a dog. It's damn unlucky to come across something like you. Amidst the messages full of insults, there was a brief message. How much money do you want? I clung to it like a lifeline, hastily replying, $500,000. I am willing to repay with 20 years of my life, unconditionally obeying any of your commands. After sending the message, I gritted my teeth and added, including dying. The other party quickly replied, bank card number. I sent the card number over, and they immediately transferred $20,000. From now on, you must unconditionally obey my commands. In 24 hours, I will consider whether to give you the remaining $480,000. I could hardly believe my eyes. Thank you so much. What do you need me to do? Now, slap yourself 10 times in the face and shout after each slap, I am a despicable person. I immediately turned on the camera and started recording, fanning my face with my phone and shouting, I'm a worthless person. I was harsh with myself, putting all my strength into each slap. After 10 slaps, my cheeks were burning with pain. I sent the video over and asked the recipient to check it. He didn't comment on whether he was satisfied, but continued to order, go bury your head in the dirt for 5 minutes. I immediately went outside, ran to the roadside, found a flower bed with sparse bushes, set up the phone to focus on me, and then dug a hole. Starting the recording, I buried my head in the dirt and slowly scooped nearby soil to cover my head. It was uncomfortable. The pungent smell of the dirt invaded my nose, and earthworms crawled onto my face. I silently counted in my mind, only pulling my head out after 300 seconds. I sent the video over and slumped by the roadside, unsure of what further perverse demands might come. But then I thought, who would offer me $500,000 if they weren't perverse? The person on the forum was named Hailey. I looked it up. It means a raft drifting in the Milky Way. Such a poetic name, yet so dark and evil. A few minutes later, the person sent another message. Go shave all your hair off. I was already sporting a buzz cut, so it wasn't much different from a bald head. There was a barber shop near the flower bed. The barber hesitated when he heard my request, as shaving it all off would mean he couldn't sell me hair care products. He said, you're very obedient. That day, Hailey didn't send any more messages. The so-called 24-hour trial only involved those 3 tasks. Was he just talking? I reassured myself that he wasn't, considering he had transferred $20,000. The next morning, I woke up to a text notification that $480,000 had been deposited. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I rubbed my eyes several times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I immediately sent a message to Hailey. I received the money. Thank you so much. For the next 20 years, I am your personal property. Whatever you need, just command me. Not going to disappear with the money? I was stunned and took a while to react, but I'm not that kind of person. I replied, since I promised to sell myself to you, I will never go back on my word. You're pathetic. Then go cut off your arm. I was dumbfounded. I could endure any amount of humiliation, but cutting off my arm was something I couldn't bring myself to do. 5 minutes have passed. Did you do it? Hailey asked. Sorry, I can't do it, I replied. Do you think you're pathetic? I can't do it right now. Please give me 6 months. I will definitely follow your command in 6 months. Why? I need to take care of my wife. I need 6 months. My wife needs a gene therapy stem cell transplant, which costs at least $500,000. I'm just a lowly network administrator, earning $6,000 a month. I was fired last month because I couldn't work while taking care of my wife. Even in poverty, my wife never complained. Now that she's ill, I can't abandon her. I need the money, but I have no means to get it. I explained my situation to Hailey, but he replied, ridiculous excuse. I had no choice but to send photos of my wife in the hospital, her diagnosis, and the payment notice. After a while, Hailey's profile picture went dark. I tried sending a few more messages, but they were all ignored. Maybe he was moved by my situation. In any case, the surgery fees were covered. I hurriedly paid the fee and went to the hospital ward, where my mother-in-law was feeding my wife congee. Wife, I've paid for the surgery. You're going to get better. Seeing my excited face, my wife asked nervously, where did you get the money? I said, I got a new job and advanced 5 years salary, but it's in a very distant place. I might be gone for a while. Where to? My wife clutched my hand tightly. Africa, I improvised. I'm going to Africa to support the development of African, Asian, and Latin American countries. They need network professionals like me. Don't worry, the country and the people will protect protect me. Haven't you seen in the news how many big companies have gone there? My wife's expression softened, and she finally smiled. It's so good to have you. I quickly added, don't worry, we'll grow old together. Make sure you get better, okay? My wife nodded heavily, tears welling up in her eyes. The doctor came for rounds, so I stepped outside the ward with my mother-in-law. She grabbed my hand and said, you didn't borrow from a loan shark, did you? Going to Africa might fool her, but I don't believe it. I know you care about her. I've always thought of you as my son. Please don't get into trouble. If we're short on money, we'll figure out a way. I reassured her, no, Mom, this money is legitimate. You can rest assured. Hearing my firm response, my mother-in-law seemed to relax a bit and dozed off in a nearby chair. Suddenly, I remembered something and took out my phone to check the messages. Your account has been credited with $480,000. Payer, Hailey. Hailey? Hale is a woman? I opened the forum again and sent Hale a message. The surgery fee has been paid. My wife's life has been saved. I will keep my promise and repay you for 20 years. If you don't mind, I'd like to thank you in person for saving my wife. I thought Hale wouldn't respond, but this time there was a quick reply. Go to Galaxy Villa number 5 now. Galaxy Villa is a high-end residential area by a lake on the western outskirts of the city, one of the city's earliest luxury villa districts. It makes sense that someone who could easily transfer $500,000 to a stranger would live here. The security guard questioned me for a long time and registered my ID before finally allowing me into the community. The area was vast and serene, with lush trees lining the roads, indicating they had been growing for many years. I've arrived and am at the entrance. With a beep, the gate of the courtyard opened. The villa's front door was ajar, and the interior was dark. Hello, is anyone here? I pushed the door open and walked into the living room, where all the windows were covered with thick curtains. A number lit up nearby. Ding! The door opened, and surprisingly, there was an elevator in the villa. But my surprise quickly faded. Under a yellow light in the elevator sat a ghastly woman, bald, with pale skin and lifeless eyes, dressed in a hospital gown and sitting in a wheelchair. I was so frightened that I staggered backward, tripping over something and falling. Fortunately, it was a wooden sofa that stopped me, and my head throbbed with pain from the impact. The wheelchair rolled toward me, the elevator door slowly closing, and the room plunged into darkness. An eerie sound grew louder as it approached. Swish! The living room was suddenly illuminated with blinding lights. The woman in the wheelchair was now right in front of me. I wasn't prepared and screamed, "A ghost!" The woman smiled, like a figure carved from limestone. "Is this how you thank your benefactor?" Her voice was hoarse, each word spoken with effort. "You are Hale?" It was hard to believe that this half-human, half-monster woman was Hale, but given that she had made me slap myself and shave my head, it seemed somewhat fitting. Hale maneuvered her electric wheelchair backward a few steps, signaling for me to sit. Thank you for saving my wife's life. I will bow to you." I stood up and gave a deep bow. "Do you do whatever I say?" she asked. "Yes, but please reconsider about cutting off my arm. I don't want you to cut off your arm or suffer anymore. I want you to live well." I felt a surge of relief and gratitude, saying, "Thank you, benefactor. Now go back, divorce your wife, and marry me." Hale's face didn't look like it was joking. "What's wrong? Is your promise a commitment or nonsense?" "Fine, I agree," I said, "but could you allow me a few more days until after her surgery? She's bedridden and can't go to the Civil Affairs Bureau." "Heh heh heh," Hale laughed, sounding like a bat. "Do you love her so much? Are you willing to divorce her?" "I do love her. I would give my life for her. But since I swore to sell myself to you, I must keep my promise." "Don't give me that crap." Hale suddenly erupted in anger. She tried to stand up using the wheelchair's armrests, but her frail legs couldn't support her weak body. "Promises? Oaths? Sacrificing your life? It's all nonsense." Hale started coughing, her body trembling and slumping back into the wheelchair, resembling a skeleton. I said, "Although I'm not capable, I always keep my word." "Fine, you keep your word. Then help me kill someone." "Who?" "Tony. Tony from Galaxy Group." Hearing this name, I was taken aback. I previously worked at Galaxy Group, and Tony was the general manager. Although I was fired from the company, I don't hate Tony. Had it not been for the corporate reform he initiated after taking office and the establishment of the network department, I wouldn't have found this job. I am still grateful to him for the 2 years I worked at the Galaxy Group. I can't figure out why I'd want to kill Tony, but judging by Hale's appearance, it's likely related to him. "Can you tell me why?" I asked. "Why?" He. Hale tapped on the phone a few times, and the TV turned on. The screen played a clear surveillance video, showing a woman in blue clothes rudely pounding on the villa's door. The door opened, revealing Hale's face. Pure, beautiful, with long, slender hair, it was a stark contrast to her current appearance. The door was kicked open. Shave her head and pour sulfuric acid on it. Two men in black grabbed Hailey and dragged her into the living room. One pressed her down from behind, and the other took out a hair clipper. After a few violent seconds, her long, black hair was left in tatters. The sound of crying echoed through the living room, and the high-end TV speakers amplified this pain countless times, deafening. The man who shaved her head opened a bottle of liquid and poured it onto Hailey's scalp, and instantly her screams of pain turned into screams of fear. She tried to break free, but could only sway slightly, not only failing to succeed, but also splashing the liquid onto her own cheek. Sulfuric acid burned her scalp, causing heart-wrenching pain. The woman in blue put on leather gloves and signaled the men to lift the woman's face. Smack, bitch, smack, bitch. Each slap was delivered with great force. After 10 consecutive slaps, both corners of Hailey's mouth were split and bleeding, but the cruelty did not end. Another man brought over a bucket of yellow soil. Hailey's head was forcefully pressed into the soil, and then the man poured another bucket of dirt over her head. Her entire body, from the top of her head to her neck, was buried in the soil, like an ostrich with its head in the sand. I watched with hair standing on end. What kind of hatred was this to be so brutal to a weak woman? Could it be? I glanced at Hailey. The scar on her scalp stretched down to her cheek, but it couldn't conceal the delicate features of her face and the prettiness of her features. Having suffered such humiliation and torture, she actually played it for me to see openly. The drama was far from over. The man pulled Hailey out of the soil, threw her to the ground, and kicked her twice. The woman in blue said, "Even if Tony is a dog, he can only be leashed to my chain." Hailey said nothing, probably too pained and disoriented. The woman in blue sat aside, lit a cigarette, and continued, "From now on, you are only allowed to be a dog, not allowed to go out, not allowed to make phone calls, and definitely not allowed to look for Tony. You should learn from this lesson that being a tramp has no good outcome." Hailey, a man ran in from off-camera, blonde and wearing glasses. I recognized the silhouette. It was Tony. Tony rushed to Hailey's side, about to help her up, but seemed to notice the sulfuric acid and didn't reach out. The woman in blue, with her legs crossed, said, "You're just in time. Tell this tramp clearly, are you going to continue playing with her or reconcile with me?" Tony looked at the woman in blue, then at Hailey and said, "Hailey, you shouldn't have seduced me. I'm too busy with work, and sometimes I'm under a lot of mental stress. You took advantage of this to seduce me, which is very disappointing." Then Tony knelt on one knee to the woman in blue and said, "Baby, don't dirty your hands. Just leave this kind of person to me to deal with." The woman in blue sneered and slapped Tony across the face, leaving him dazed. "Who are you trying to fool? Isn't she your childhood sweetheart? What do you mean you're under a lot of work pressure? You're just a dog of the Serena family. You slept around with women as soon as I broke up with you? Don't you know how to be a good dog?" I know, I was wrong, baby. I was so heartbroken when you broke up with me that I got involved with her. I promise to only be your doggy from now on." Woof, woof, woof. The woman in blue laughed, stroked Tony's face, and said with a hint of pain, "Did that hurt?" "It doesn't hurt, baby. When you hit me, it's the most comfortable." "Really? Then go ahead and slap her a couple of times so I can see if she enjoys it." Without hesitation, Tony turned and slapped Hailey twice. "Let's go. I'll reward you tonight." The people in the frame filed out one after another, disappearing from the surveillance camera's view. Hailey turned off the TV and said to me, "That woman is Serena, the daughter of a major shareholder of the Galaxy Group. Tony dated her, and after she dumped him, he got together with me." I said, "So that's how he became the general manager of the Galaxy Group. Perhaps because she was reliving her tragic past." Hailey had calmed down a lot at the moment. "I don't know what I did wrong. Tony was my childhood playmate. We grew up together, and I never expected him to become like this. You didn't do anything wrong. They are the ones in the wrong. They are the ones who should be punished. But what qualifications do I have to avenge Hailey? I don't even have $500,000 for surgery fees. You said you would unconditionally obey my commands, right?" Hailey looked at me coldly, like a piece of ice. "Inherit my estate and destroy that despicable couple." Hailey's real name is Hailey. Hailey's parents died young, leaving behind not only a massive inheritance, but also a large sum in insurance compensation. This money was all deposited into a trust set up for Hailey. There are two conditions for accessing the trust. One is that Hailey must be 30 years old, and the other is that she must be married. She has half a month left until her 30th birthday. Marriage is difficult. These two conditions were set to prevent Hailey from being deceived or exploited. Therefore, Hailey has never mentioned this trust to anyone. On the way back to the hospital, I was filled with mixed emotions. At this point in my life, I have never broken my promises. It is the foundation of who I am. But if I divorce my wife to help Hailey with her revenge, it would also be a betrayal of my commitment to her. Distracted, I returned to the ward and was surprised to hear my mother-in-law call me dad and the nurse call me aunt. The surgery has been scheduled for 6 days from now. Noticing something was wrong, my wife took my hand and asked what was wrong. I couldn't answer. She then asked when I would be leaving for Africa. I said I was waiting for the company's notice, which should be soon. She smiled and said, "Do whatever you need to do. I will always support you. Whatever decision you make, don't keep it from me." I sensed a deeper meaning in her words. She didn't ask further and handed me her phone. The hairdresser who often cuts her hair had sent a message saying he saw me doing something strange by the roadside, covered in dirt and shaving my head. I took off my hat and said, "Do you think I'm possessed?" My wife shook her head and said, "You've done so much for me. I'm already very satisfied. Don't lie to me. Where did the money come from?" Unable to resist, I told her everything. My wife cried deeply, sobbing so hard she nearly fainted. After a long time, she said, "The doctor says I can get up and move around. Let's go file for divorce tomorrow." Hailey and I had no wedding. To take the photo for the marriage certificate, Hailey ate large amounts of fish, meat, and supplements for several days, trying to improve her complexion. She put on a glamorous outfit, a hat, and light makeup, looking much better compared to the ghostly figure from the elevator. I pushed her into the Civil Affairs Bureau, drawing many admiring glances. Perhaps in their eyes, this is what true love looks like. Back home, Hailey began to explain her revenge plan. The amount in the trust shocked me. It was money I could never earn in 10 lifetimes, or even see in 10 lifetimes. Subtracting $500,000 from it barely made a dent. With the trust authorization letter in hand, I took over Hailey's assets in a towering skyscraper. The trust manager in charge was named Lewis. He was a mixed-race man, and though his hair had turned white, he looked very spirited. Hailey had asked me to deliver a letter to him. After reading the letter, Lewis took me to a private office. "What are you planning to do?" Lewis asked. To be honest, I hadn't decided, or rather, I couldn't figure it out. As a network administrator with a monthly salary of $6,000 who had been fired, I had no idea how to destroy a large corporation or take down a wealthy heiress and her dog. I had no way to do any of it. Seeing me at a loss for words, Lewis shrugged and said, "Miss Hailey's marriage to you surprised me. Sorry, I meant no offense. I just thought she was prepared." His words irritated me further. When Hailey was being insulted at home, you were here acting high and mighty. Now that Hailey is taking action, you mock her, a pretentious foreigner, putting on airs. I said, "If I were you, since you've kept quiet all this time, you should keep quiet until you're in your grave. We USA value unity of knowledge and action, concealment, and many other things. We do not value being a bystander or lacking moral judgment. If you don't understand these terms, you'd better go out into the world. Staying up here every day is likely to give you a stroke." Lewis's face flushed and he shut up, taking out a stack of documents from a safe. "These are the materials I've collected. They might be useful for Miss Hailey. Please take them back with you." The documents were sealed, and I couldn't tell what was inside at the moment, so I took them all back to the villa. Hailey locked herself in her room for a day, studying, and gave me a strange order to take over the convenience store downstairs from Galaxy Group. I couldn't understand, since the goal was to take down Tony and Serena, and with such a large sum of money, shouldn't we establish a company, compete in the market, bankrupt Galaxy Group, and leave the dog lovers on the streets? That's how it's portrayed in TV dramas and novels. Hailey didn't explain or discuss it with me, so I had no choice but to follow orders. The office building where Galaxy Group is located has an open cafe in the lobby and a 24-hour convenience store. Just relying on the office workers, both businesses are doing quite well. When I inquired with the property management, I learned that the lease for the convenience store was about to expire, and the property management was preparing to renew it. I immediately offered to increase the rent by 30% to take over the store. With me as a backup, the property management promptly called the store owner, demanding a 30% rent increase. I vaguely heard the store owner cursing the property management for being untrustworthy and stating that he would no longer rent the space. I successfully took over the convenience store and retained the original staff and suppliers. During the handover, the former owner complained to me. He said that while the foot traffic in the office building was good, the profit margins were thin. His bottom line for the rent increase was 30%. If the property management had proposed a 29% increase, he would have agreed to renew the lease. He looked at me with pity and disdain, thinking I was a novice who didn't know how to run a store. Increasing the rent by 30% meant working for the property management at a loss. I smiled and said nothing, but I was full of doubts. Could Lewis's information be so accurate? With the contract in hand, I returned to the villa, completing the first step of the revenge easily. The next day, I brought a stack of vouchers to Galaxy Group and told the administrative supervisor that I was a former Galaxy Group employee who had opened a convenience store downstairs and wanted to offer some benefits to old colleagues. $200 per person, unconditional, for all Galaxy Group employees. After confirming that my offer was genuine, the administrative supervisor immediately gathered the entire company for registration. With $200 per person and over 300 employees, $60,000 in employee benefits fell from the sky, all credited to her as an administrative supervisor. She looked at me with sympathy, afraid I might suddenly come to my senses. After registration, I told her that I hoped to visit President Tony and personally thank him for his support. As the dismissal was a matter for the HR department, not her administrative duties, she was naturally happy to bring me to Tony, making a show of it and annoying other departments. At the general manager's office, the administrative supervisor knocked on the door. The moment I entered, I saw Serena spring up from Tony's desk, looking embarrassed and agitated. Wearing a black silk bodycon skirt, a shoulder-bearing deep V dress, and sparkling diamond fragments, she looked very alluring. She pointed at the administrative supervisor and scolded, "Don't you know to knock before entering? Even dogs have more manners." It seemed this Serena truly loved dogs. I expected the administrative supervisor to be terrified, but she simply said, "I did knock, but you must have been too focused on work to hear." Tony still had visible lipstick marks on his face, and 2 buttons on his shirt were undone. He cleared his throat impatiently and said, "What's the matter?" The supervisor said, "This is the owner of the convenience store downstairs and a former Galaxy Group employee. He is grateful to President Tony and has come to give each Galaxy Group employee a $200 gift card." Serena rolled her eyes and said disdainfully, "$200? It's pathetic you're giving that. It's not even enough to buy a toilet." I immediately laughed and said, "The convenience store is a small business and can't compare to Galaxy Group, but I am truly grateful to President Tony for the job opportunity, so I am offering what I can as a benefit to my old colleagues. They might need milk and sandwiches more than you need a toilet." "All right, I get it," Tony said. "Is there anything you need me to do?" "Nothing at all." Tony was surprised and emphasized again, "Nothing at all? Just giving away $60,000? Just say what you want. Don't be shy. Even a hungry dog has to bark." Serena said, "I've seen people like you before, giving benefits to gain something from the company." I smiled and said, "Really? Nothing at all. I won't disturb you any longer. Goodbye." As I closed the door, I heard Serena yelling at the supervisor, "Don't ever bring such people into the company again. Go sell tea eggs at the convenience store instead." I stopped and pretended to tie my shoelaces, pressing my ear to the door. The supervisor said, "The company does indeed have some unsavory characters." This supervisor was neither servile nor overbearing. Thus, the second step of the revenge was also completed. In the face of the $60,000 benefit, the supervisor created a large group with over 300 members. Except for Tony and Serena, all employees of Galaxy Group were in the group. Of course, the group was set up for buying things at half price. I repeatedly emphasized in the group that it was only open to Galaxy Group employees and that no non-employees should be added. But who wouldn't want to take advantage of such a big discount? I occasionally noticed that the number of people in the group kept increasing, nearly reaching 400. The group was created by the supervisor, so I pretended not to see it and just posted ads in the group. With promotions, they felt the 50% off was worthwhile, seeing it as profitable. As a result, more friends were added to the group. The supervisor turned a blind eye, approving all applications without question. At 50% off, it was like having all 3 meals a day at my store. Every day, the convenience store was bustling, like a department of Galaxy Group. It didn't take long before they noticed something was off about me. A former network administrator who was dismissed by the company, now a small convenience store owner, wearing a $2 million watch, an $18,000 shirt, and switching between Japanese and French on the phone. Occasionally, someone would see me driving different luxury cars and leaving the parking lot. Combined with my frequent free meals and red envelopes, stories about me began circulating in Galaxy Group. People always want to believe they've discovered a hidden, sensational secret. Of course, this was all intentional. To prepare for that call, I had practiced my lines at home all night. The goal was to make them think I was an idle rich second generation who was just experiencing life through opening a store. I installed listening devices under the tables in the store and frequently overheard Galaxy Group employees discussing my identity during meals. It was time to prove they were right. I announced in the group that the store would be closed for 3 days starting tomorrow. Tomorrow was Monday, the busiest time for Galaxy Group, and also when they needed me most. Some employees were unhappy and asked in the group what was going on. How could the store close for 3 days? I didn't respond in the group, but privately messaged each one, saying that my father had come back and I needed to help him adjust to the time difference. I hadn't done any of his tasks and was crying. The words return and adjusting to the time difference sparked their great interest. After my hints and suggestions, plus their spreading in smaller groups, the reason for the closure spread throughout Galaxy Group. My dad returned from abroad and wanted me to learn management and seek investment projects, but I only wanted to be a lazy person. This time, I was inevitably going to be scolded by the mysterious father. Whether the convenience store could continue operating was still uncertain. He wanted me to complete a $1 billion investment, but I hadn't even looked for projects. I saw an employee's post on social media that read, "So I've been eating tea eggs cooked by a rich second generation with a 10 billion fortune every day." A colleague replied, "If he's investing 10 billion, his net worth must be at least a zero more." Thus, I had completed the 3 tasks Hailey assigned to me. The day after the closure, I received a call from the supervisor wanting to meet me for an important matter. I put on my headset and kept the conversation with Hailey open. Indeed, I met Tony at the place the supervisor mentioned. Tony, without any courtesy, immediately asked me if I was looking for a $1 billion investment project. I showed a cautious expression, stepped back, and kept my distance from Tony while saying no. This action made Tony believe even more that I was truly a rich second generation, because my persona was that of someone afraid of being deceived. It wouldn't be possible to trust someone who once looked down on me immediately. I'll be straightforward. Galaxy Group is preparing for an IPO. The company's shares are currently very scattered. If your father is willing to invest, the future returns will exceed 500%. Upon hearing Tony mention my father, I immediately showed a nervous expression. It indicated that I was under great pressure from my father, who wanted me to be successful while I was just a useless person. I asked him, "How can you guarantee that?" Tony became confident and said, "The daughter of Galaxy Group's major shareholder is my fiancée. She will definitely be the future chairman of Galaxy Group. I am the general manager, and if we want to, we can easily consolidate the scattered shares. When the company goes public, the original shares will be worth at least 5 times more. 500% is a conservative estimate." I immediately understood why Hailey wanted me to pretend to be a rich second generation. She must have known about Galaxy Group's IPO plan long ago. Of course, the IPO itself wasn't the key. The key was that these 2 dogs wanted to use the opportunity to encroach on other shareholders' interests and turn Galaxy Group into their private asset. I immediately countered, "Galaxy Group is going public, so all shareholders must know. How could they possibly sell their shares to you at this time? Even if they wanted to sell, it wouldn't be at the current price." Tony smirked and said, "To be honest, these minor shareholders have no right to refuse. Out of the 27 shareholders, aside from Serena's family, I have leverage over the remaining 26. Saying that, Tony took out his phone and showed me a video. In the video, a middle-aged bald man was embracing 2 simple yet sexy women engaged in illicit activities. You have leverage over 26 shareholders? That's just one example. People aren't perfect. I immediately approached warmly and called him, "Brother, how much do you need? Is 1 billion enough?" By saying, "Is 1 billion enough?" rather than, "Is 1 billion sufficient?" I wanted Tony to feel that I was eager to complete my father's task without caring about the specifics. 1 billion is just right. Great, let's do it. I'll transfer the money to you. Tony was stunned, probably never expecting me to be so naive. "Don't we discuss the contract first? I don't understand. I'll leave everything to you. But what if it turns out to be a loss?" Tony waved his hand dismissively. "Not possible. You can be 1,000,000% assured. As soon as we go public, I guarantee a 500% return. And if it doesn't go public, then I'll not only return your principal, but also compensate you with double." I clapped my hands happily and hugged Tony, jumping with excitement. In the name of my father's request, I had Tony find a guarantor. It was, of course, Serena. Tony's ability to secure a $1 billion investment suddenly made her favor this dog. She had always been called a trophy daughter and had long wanted to prove herself. Surrounded by Tony, who was eager to please, was her way of venting frustration. Now, this frustration could be transformed into fame. She would make a grand transition into a strong woman during Galaxy Group's IPO process. Tony treated me like a fool, often sharing his imperial wisdom. How to install cameras in offices, nightclubs, and hotels. How to use intermediaries to manipulate key figures. How to endure being a despised freeloader shareholder until fame arrived. These were his proud topics. Tony spent 3 times the price to acquire the shares of the remaining 26 shareholders. Now, Galaxy Group had only 2 shareholders, Serena's family and Tony. Serena's family turned a blind eye to Tony's actions since it was all in the family. After the convenience store resumed operations, Galaxy Group employees were buzzing with gossip about the power struggle. It was quite exciting, but I knew that the proud mantis would always be a mere snack for the cicada. As days passed, Hailey's gaze toward me grew increasingly strange, but apart from seeking revenge, she said nothing more. The crucial moments for the IPO were approaching. Tony and Serena had completed the consolidation of shares. The major and minor shareholders had joined forces, becoming the absolute controllers of Galaxy Group. Tony even began celebrating with champagne on social media, presenting himself as a devout bell ringer. His time was running out. As the IPO review was nearing its end, the 26 shareholders jointly issued a statement and submitted relevant reports to the stock exchange. Serena instructed Tony to maliciously acquire shares and to threaten them personally. The so-called threats involved blackmailing other shareholders by secretly filming their private lives. Tony was shocked when he saw this statement. Such a self-destructive report was useless to him because acquiring shares was not illegal, and he had paid a high price. Faced with my questioning, Tony was even more baffled. He had told me all this long ago, yet I now claimed ignorance. I explained that my father was very concerned about public image and that a public scandal would be difficult to explain. He repeatedly assured me to relax. After hanging up, I immediately used a secondary account to post the shareholder statement in the convenience store group. Is Galaxy Group going bankrupt? Seeing the group become active, I posted screenshots of the prepared chat logs. These logs were carefully selected, consisting only of Tony's brief comments with no context. Tony's imperial wisdom with 30 to 40 statements. He was originally just a pretty boy and freeloader in the company. Seeing his despicable acts, secretly filming, fishing for information, monitoring employees, and embezzling, combined with the 26 shareholders statement, the group exploded. I knew these chat logs would soon reach Tony and Serena and would quickly spread to the stock market and the public. But this was just an appetizer, merely to guide public attention to Galaxy Group. Tony must have felt like he had swallowed a fly at this moment. The next day, as the subplot of Galaxy Group's IPO began to ferment, a thunderclap exploded on the internet. Hailey reported to the police. It had been 4 years since Serena abused Hailey in her home. During these 4 years, Hailey lived like a ghost. Every day in the dark villa, unable to speak, move, or take care of herself. She had been waiting for this day. Surveillance videos and hospital evidence were already prepared, but she had not taken action because even if she reported immediately, Serena would only be detained for a few days and then released by her father's influence, and Tony wouldn't be affected at all. They might even collaborate with the media to twist the facts, portraying Hailey as a homewrecker deserving of punishment. Hailey only had one chance. Her story spread wildly online. How she was deceived by Tony, beaten and humiliated by Serena, how she went from a blossoming young woman to a pitiable state, and how she struggled through countless suicidal thoughts. Surveillance videos were rapidly spread through various channels. Some found Hailey's photos from her youth, contrasting her past beauty with her current appearance. As everyone discussed this sudden hot topic, Hailey was spotted on the street. Reporters and self-media flocked to her, with hundreds of cameras trained on her. For 4 years, she had watched the surveillance videos thousands of times, preparing mentally for this day. Hailey wore thin clothing, her bones protruding, with half-exposed arms reduced to skin and bones, sitting in a wheelchair like a grayish-white skeletal figure. She wore no hat, her head bare, with a few sparse strands of hair and other areas burned by acid. Every few steps she had to rest. Without expression, she appeared profoundly sorrowful. Traffic was severely congested, and the whole world saw this scene. Serena was formally charged with intentional harm, and the police took her away. From the office to the police car, Serena cursed all the way. "You dogs, why are you arresting me? That bitch isn't dead. Even if I beat her to death, so what? Don't you still have to let me out and apologize?" Among Galaxy Group's 300 employees, there were. With over 300 employees at Galaxy Group, a few of them inevitably had their phones ready. Hailey's sorrow and Serena's brutality formed a disturbing contrast. Tony's personal information was thoroughly exposed. Scumbag, lickspittle, freeloader maggot. Among the vast amount of gossip, one item stood out. Tony entered Galaxy Group with his college girlfriend, but they soon broke up. His ex-girlfriend still worked at Galaxy Group as an administrative supervisor. No wonder she was indifferent to the despicable behavior of the two and even dared to confront Serena directly. She wasn't just indifferent, she had long been disgusted. The massive public outcry and criminal case intervention led to Galaxy Group's IPO being canceled. Tony was trying to find a way to bail Serena out while dealing with this disastrous news. Without a second's delay, I appeared before him, looking puzzled, and asked, "Brother, what's going on? Why hasn't it gone through?" Tony took a call. Serena's father had finally realized that I was not a rich second generation after all, so he was only suited to being a freeloader. Without missing a beat, the top-notch legal team introduced by Lewis made their grand entrance. Such a large sum and such a straightforward case were like a once-in-a-lifetime windfall for them. Tony didn't have much money, but Serena was different. Many of Serena's family assets were in her name, including Galaxy Group, which was now a target for the legal team's assault. To my great surprise, Hailey easily forgave Serena. This meant she wouldn't have to serve jail time and could be given probation, but her family's assets were being steadily depleted under the legal team's attack. Within a year or so, Serena's family would be impoverished, becoming the very ordinary people she despised. Perhaps, in this flashy world, being a commoner might truly be the real imprisonment for Serena. The results of my wife's follow-up check were very optimistic. Her recovery was going very well. I wanted to see her, but she firmly refused and never called or texted me. She was like a distant star, disappearing from my sight. But after all, I had sold myself to Hailey for 20 years, so I had to keep my promise. Hailey asked me to go to the villa, and when I arrived, I found that Lewis was also there. Seeing me, Lewis was very enthusiastic and immediately launched into a dialect. Why are you only just arriving? I've been waiting for ages." Hailey was puzzled, looking at him and then at me. Lewis said, "I'm a mixed blood, that's true, but I'm not a fake foreigner." I understood now. He was getting back at me. Lewis first updated us on the litigation progress. Serena's family wanted to negotiate, to continue running the business and proceed with the listing within the agreed time, with additional compensation. Hailey shook her head, indicating rejection. Lewis naturally moved on to the second matter. The Greek island had been purchased. It had a ready-made house, and they could move in any time. "Are you planning to immigrate?" I asked in surprise. Hailey remained silent, pulling out an agreement and handing it to me. "I should have died long ago. It's you who made me believe there's still love and commitment in this world. You can take half of this $2 billion. Looking at the agreement in my hand, I was at a loss. $1 billion was a number I never even dared to dream of. You had many chances to take the money and walk away, or to cooperate with that pair of scoundrels, but you didn't. It's you who made me want to keep living." Seeing me standing there dazed, Lewis explained, "Actually, when Hailey transferred $500,000 to you, she had already decided to end her life. She went on that forum to find a less painful way and ended up meeting you." I remembered the times Hailey looked at me with increasingly strange eyes. She was either doubting if I was a normal person or doubting if she was normal. I handed the agreement back to her and said, "With this $1 billion, I want to buy something from you." "What?" "I want to buy back my freedom and remarry my wife." Hailey smiled and said, "You don't need this $1 billion. I had already planned to do this. But before that, there's one important thing." As soon as she finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. I opened the door to find 26 Galaxy Group shareholders outside. Hailey greeted them without any pleasantries. "After Galaxy Group changes ownership, I will transfer the shares to you at the original price. From now on, you will be the owners of Galaxy Group." The leading shareholder representative expressed approval. "Then our choice was correct. You can't hide the truth forever. Personal matters are handled personally, but we can't go against making money." Another shareholder said, "Tony claimed he destroyed the video, but who knows if he really did. I can't trust such a person." After Lewis and the shareholders left, Hailey took out the marriage certificate and we went to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get divorced. She turned off the wheelchair's motor and let me push her down the road. Many people watched us with curiosity, just as they did when we got married. Perhaps in their eyes, such a hand-in-hand departure was what true love was. I walked slowly, very slowly. In my ears, I could still hear Lewis quietly saying as he left, "The trust conditions don't include marriage. Hailey's actions were likely to protect your wife. Abandoning my sick wife and marrying Hailey would likely be seen as the epitome of being a scoundrel. Even if Serena's family discovered I had a wife, they naturally wouldn't bully her. After all, she was also a victim of mine and an enemy. An enemy's enemy is a friend." After completing the divorce, Hailey stopped me downstairs at the Civil Affairs Bureau. "Go ahead," she said. I looked at her. Her expression seemed to have changed. "Thank you for letting me experience experience being protected by a responsible man. I can handle the rest of the journey on my own." Hailey turned a corner and slowly disappeared into the traffic. I didn't know if I was that responsible man, but I knew that she could handle the rest of the journey by herself. The end. If you like Kitten's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.